I'm Will Klerman, CEO of eKitabu, and in the context of APIF, what I do is I think, I ask questions. I support our team in Kenya, trying to scratch at more than the surface of how we get books used to improve learning and lives. So yesterday, Bettina Gappa, who's one of Africa's best writers and original voices, she mentioned a statistic that I don't know if the number is precisely right, but I've heard it before, and she really made me think when she was raising it. And that's 18% of Africa's trade is within the continent. And there are different ways to measure that in terms of money, in terms of margin, in terms of value added. But whichever those or other ones it may be, you want to apply that 18% to, it tells you that a lot is leaving the continent that's valuable and not getting used in the continent. She gave an example of her home country, Zimbabwe, that exports 100% of its sugar and then has to import from South Africa to have sugar in their coffee. And there are other stories like that from around the continent. Different people analyze that different ways, but it seems like something that's got to change. Bettina was using the words a revolution of competence, which I loved, and then other people will often use the word development, which I don't know, I'm using that word less and less because it has to me some kind of paternalistic ring, and I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable. So we're really happy to have the support of the International Publishers Association, Sheikha Bodur. She's been magnificent, really. And we're happy to be here in her country and enjoying the warmth of her hospitality, the relationships that she has brought together. I mean, in our project in APIF, we're doing what eKitabu does. We're delivering accessible digital content for education to children with disabilities and children without disabilities in a set of schools. It's really for us an experiment in how we get materials used for improving learning. We do that experiment a lot, and we're not anywhere near the end of it. Each time we work on this and we keep digging deeper into it, we unpack pieces and find questions that we can answer about how to make the connection between, on the one hand, published material, and on the other hand, learning and learning outcomes. So in the 6 schools where we're working in Kenya in this project, we're working with the children, we're working with the teachers, and we're working with the publishers. And in particular with the publishers, what we're doing is we are, as Lawrence Ajagi, chairman of Kenya Publishers Association, said last night, we're training people. Okay, that's one word for it, but I think we're learning together about what local publishers' processes are to develop their books on the one hand, and then we bring understanding and experience with global standards for accessibility. So adaptations to digital materials. We have a studio where we produce local sign language adaptations of storybooks, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of the coolest stuff that we do. We have a team of deaf signers in Kenya, and the whole project is directed by a deaf teacher named Georgina Uma Obura. She's the director of our studio, KSL. KSL means Kenyan Sign Language. And we have another similar team of deaf, fluent Rwandan Sign Language signers in Kigali, in Rwanda. And we've done this work in a number of countries now. Each country has its own national sign language. I'm sort of diving into a piece of accessibility. But sign language is particularly fun and interesting because deaf storytellers they bring a lot of expression to the stories that they tell. And so it's great filming them. It's great producing these storybooks. In fact, I think what's going to happen now is we're going to start moving away from just adapting existing storybooks and doing a whole new season of a thing that we developed called Digital Storytime that will probably focus on HIV awareness and probably focus on life during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll probably come up with some original characters. I mean, we kind of hope in our dreams like we're Sesame Street for deaf kids in Africa. So when you get deaf and hearing children together in the same setting, watching, listening to stories, something magical happens. And it's just so cool. They're riveted. I mean, kids can sit in one of these digital storytime sessions for 3 hours. Nobody wants to leave. So it's, like I said, it's one of the more fun things that we do. Looking at the impact or even learning about how children acquire language from that project is particularly interesting work. One of my colleagues, a woman on the team, Leah, her son is deaf, and she has 2 kids, two hearing daughters, and her son is deaf. And so she plays digital story time with them, and especially during the pandemic when schools were closed in Kenya, it seems like Mark really appreciated and gained a lot from the stories and from proper sign language communication. I mean, over 90% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. So for the most part, they don't acquire any formal language. They have no way to communicate. I mean, people work things out, right, in a home, but they have no linguistic development until they reach school, which is typically significantly later than their hearing peers, if they ever join school at all. So, this how, if I can say, technology can close gaps in distribution, in access and accessibility for children, even children out of school, we think is interesting. We always try to support the work of publishers, local authors and publishers, and not only learning a lot with the publishers we work with in our project, but we're enjoying, and I think really learning new things from the other awardees, or whatever we should call them, other organizations and people in this APIF cohort. I mean, you met my colleagues Bushira from Ghana and Chirakure from Zimbabwe. Kathy, we're already working with Kathy in Rwanda, actually before APIF, but Kathy and the team in Save Rwanda, we've been working with them. We love those guys. They're good people. So I'm thinking, who else? Let's see. So Allison, you haven't met yet, but you'll talk to her later. We've worked with Allison before, but really getting to know her in this setting has been something eye-opening, interesting. We like serious people. I think you must know what I mean. It's nice to connect with people who care about what they do. The journey isn't alone, the journey is together, and important for that reason. If we can find ways to go together, then we probably can find ways to come together and solve problems, even the ones that are biggest. So an optimistic future for publishing. I think on the continent of Africa, what that looks like is more sustainability for local authors, local publishers, more people reading each other's work. Recognition from outside the continent is always a big deal and tends to come with more money historically and nowadays. But the voices, the ideas, the readership, seeing those grow for publishers, African publishers, that seems like an optimistic future, and I think it's one that's attainable. We believe in local authorship, local publishing, as necessary to a human conversation, certainly to learning. And we think, learning and conversation probably go hand in hand. Support the ideas, the energy, the talent, the sustainability of original content development and publication on the continent of Africa depends on, in some sense, reach, readership. I hope that in things that we're doing, we're finding ways to give African voices more reach even within their countries. I'll give you a tangential example, because the mainstream example is harder to substantiate, but definitely here at the Sharjah International Book Fair, I've gotten some new ideas about experiments we can try to, leaving aside education and educational materials, grown-up ideas and grown-up authorship, whether it's, or nonfiction, sharing political ideas or sharing perspective on things like art, society, bringing those voices out. I've got some ideas I'm coming away from here with, and I'm happy about that, because I think we will try some things with friends we've made. But in this matter of amplifying voices, we do a lot of work, as I mentioned, in sign language, local sign languages of Africa. Kenyan Sign Language is recognized in the Constitution of Kenya. Zimbabwean Sign Language, as I just learned yesterday, is recognized in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Rwandan Sign Language, a counterexample, is not yet recognized by the government of Rwanda, nor is it a language of instruction in schools. So a lot of the work that we do has an element of advocacy, where we're bringing attention and also to get something recognized. For example, Rwandan Sign Language, we're working with Rwanda National Union of the Deaf, and a lot of getting a sign language recognized by its national government is having some standards for what constitutes proper sign language in that country. So Rwandan Sign Language doesn't have any kind of dictionary. We are working with Rwanda National Union of the Deaf. It's really their project, and we're just, cheerleading from the sidelines to finish a Rwandan Sign Language dictionary, an RSL dictionary, because that turns out to be one of the critical stepping stones to getting government recognition. Because once you put the language into a book, put it on the table with the government, then they can no longer say, you haven't taken that step to formalize this language and substantiate that it is worthy of recognition. So that's it's an interesting function of a book, right? It's an interesting purpose for a book that can somehow validate a whole language, a whole community of people in a country. And similarly with indigenous languages in lots of countries, however 50, 60, 70 languages there are in Nigeria, the 43 plus there are in Kenya, and many languages in many countries. We do a lot of work in indigenous languages too, and it's interesting because for the most part there aren't materials, there aren't stories written down in those languages that children can access, even though the children are hearing those languages as their mother tongue in the home. So, those are things that I hope we're doing by means of books and therefore publishing, that are, making a difference.